She boarded the flight quietly, dressed in a hoodie and jeans, no designer labels, no flashy jewelry, just confidence and calm. To the crew, she looked like someone who didn't belong in first class. Within minutes, she was surrounded by security, her bag snatched, and her dignity questioned in front of dozens of staring passengers. No one knew her name, no one cared to ask. But what the airline didn't realize was that the woman they dragged off that plane wasn't just another traveler. They had just humiliated Ava Mitchell, the billionaire CEO whose investment firm had poured billions into saving their company from financial ruin. In that moment, they thought they were removing a problem. In reality, they were igniting a storm. What happened next wasn't fueled by rage, but by strategy, precision, and power. This is the shocking story of how a quiet act of racial profiling led to the collapse of an entire airline empire, and how one black woman used her influence to turn humiliation into a historic $4 billion reckoning. The terminal buzzed with the usual early morning tension, sleepy travelers dragging roller bags, tired parents juggling toddlers and snacks, business types glued to phones with Bluetooth earpieces, blinking blue. Amid them, Ava Mitchell moved with quiet ease, her presence unnoticed, exactly how she preferred it. She wore a simple gray hoodie, dark jeans, and worn-in sneakers. Her curly hair was tucked into a low bun beneath a black cap. No designer labels, no entourage, no flash. Most people wouldn't have looked at her twice. But if they had, they might have noticed the calm sharpness in her eyes, the kind of poise that came from years of Boardroom's billion-dollar decisions and outsmarting people who underestimated her. It was 7:42 a.m. and Flight 327 to San Francisco was boarding. Ava scanned her digital boarding pass one more time, first-class seat 1A. She preferred the window, she always did, quiet, strategic, observant. As she stepped onto the jet bridge, a flight attendant greeted the line with mechanical cheer. "Good morning, welcome aboard." Ava gave a polite nod, keeping her eyes forward. She entered the cabin and turned left into the first-class section. The wide leather seats gleamed under soft yellow lighting. A few passengers had already settled in, sipping orange juice or scrolling through their phones. But before Ava could slide into her seat, a blonde flight attendant with a taut smile stepped directly in her path. "I think you're lost, ma'am," the woman said crisply, her eyes narrowing as they dropped to Ava's sneakers and rose slowly to her face. Ava stopped short, her brow lifting slightly. "Excuse me, this section is for first-class passengers only." The attendant repeated, her tone firmer this time, as if Ava hadn't heard her correctly the first time. Ava stood her ground. "Seat 1A, that's me." The woman blinked, visibly thrown off. "I'm going to need to see your boarding pass." Before Ava could reach into her hoodie pocket, two security guards emerged from the galley, large men in navy uniforms, walkie-talkies crackling at their hips. One of them stepped forward, his eyes locked on Ava's carry-on. "Ma'am, we've had a report. You need to come with us." Ava's voice remained calm. "A report of what? You don't have a valid reservation," the guard said brusquely. "We've been told to escort you off the plane." Passengers turned their heads now, drawn by the rising tension. A man in a suit 2 rows back pulled out his phone and started recording. A mother held her child a little closer. A young woman near the window shifted uncomfortably. "I'd like to clarify something," Ava said, keeping her voice low but firm. "I booked this flight 2 weeks ago, paid in full, first class. Seat 1A, is there a reason I'm being treated like a security threat?" The flight attendant crossed her arms, lips pursed. "We received an alert about a suspicious passenger trying to enter the wrong cabin." "Suspicious?" Ava echoed. "Because I'm sitting in the right seat with the wrong outfit." The guard didn't answer. Instead, he reached for her bag. "I'll carry my own bag," Ava said sharply, yanking the strap back and standing. The second guard stepped closer. "Ma'am, you're holding up the flight." Ava stared at him for a long moment, then slowly nodded. She knew what was happening. She could argue, she could show the receipt right then and there, but she also knew what came next, and she was already 3 steps ahead. As they guided her off the plane, passengers watched the scene unfold in quiet discomfort. A few murmured to one another. A man whispered, Bet they feel real stupid in a minute, but most just looked away. The moment her foot hit the jet bridge floor, Ava's phone buzzed. She looked down. Text from Jordan, executive assistant, just confirmed Thompson Air finalized the $4B investment with Mitchell Capital. Congrats, boss. Ava, read it once. Then again, she didn't reply. She just smiled, subtle, serene, because this wasn't just a flight. This was a revelation. And Thompson Air had no idea the storm it had just called down on itself. She was led back to the gate, where a crowd of new passengers was gathering. The gate agent blinked in confusion as Ava appeared with 2 security guards behind her. Wait, the agent said, pulling up the screen. There's a valid first-class ticket here, Mitchell, Ava. The guard looked annoyed. That can't be. She didn't show up in the system when we searched. The agent shook her head. It's right here. Checked in. Confirmed. TSA cleared. Why was she removed? The flight attendant appeared again, flustered. I must have mixed up the seat assignments, or you made an assumption, Ava replied smoothly, tucking her phone into her pocket. One that just cost your company more than you can imagine. The guard looked at her, confused. You a lawyer or something? Ava chuckled softly. No, I'm the reason Thompson Air still exists, or was. She turned and walked away, the automatic doors opening for her like the calm before a tidal wave. Back inside the terminal, she found an empty seat by gate 7, sat down and opened her laptop. She didn't have to yell. She didn't have to cause a scene. Ava Mitchell was far more dangerous when she was quiet, calculating, focused, and now she had all the focus in the world. From behind her sunglasses, she watched the flight take off through the window, unaware that it would be the last smooth flight Thompson Air would enjoy for a very, very long time. Ava Mitchell sat near gate 7, legs crossed, laptop open, and fingers gliding smoothly across the keyboard. Around her, the terminal swirled with noise, boarding calls echoing over the loudspeaker, babies crying, wheels of luggage clattering on tile. But inside her mind, it was quiet. Still, focused, she wasn't angry, not yet. Instead, she reviewed the documents for Mitchell Capital's recent investment, a $4 billion lifeline to Thompson Air, a major carrier that had been 1 quarter away from bankruptcy. Her team had vetted the numbers, negotiated for months, and finally signed the deal just 48 hours ago. It was the kind of transaction that could shape the entire industry. Ava closed her laptop slowly and took a sip of tea. She hadn't even looked at the voucher they'd slipped into her hand. A worthless attempt to cover a $4 billion mistake. The sound of hurried footsteps broke her concentration. She looked up. The flight attendant from earlier, the same one who'd blocked her entry into first class, was Speed, walking toward her, face flushed and hands clenched tightly around a tablet. Behind her came a man in a gray suit with a badge that read Alan Wexler, Terminal Operations Supervisor. His tie was slightly crooked, and sweat beaded along his hairline. "Miss Mitchell?" he asked, his voice low but urgent. Ava didn't move. "Yes." Alan cleared his throat. "There's been a mix-up. A system error flagged your seat as unassigned. Apparently, someone thought it had been canceled." The flight attendant stood beside him, awkwardly silent. Her previous arrogance had drained from her face, replaced with a tight, lipped apology she wasn't quite ready to say aloud. Ava raised an eyebrow. "A system error? Yes," Alan said, avoiding her gaze. "Your seat must have been accidentally double booked, and in the confusion." Ava cut him off with a quiet, measured tone. "Let's not pretend this was confusion. I was profiled, judged, removed without even being allowed to show my ticket. That wasn't a system error, that was a human choice." Alan squirmed. "I assure you, this isn't how we operate, and I personally apologize for the inconvenience." She held out her phone, tapping the screen. "Here's my reservation confirmation, paid in full, first class, booked 2 weeks ago." He peered at the timestamp. His face tightened. "Right, yes, I see that now." Ava stood slowly, dusting off her jeans with a calm that made Alan even more nervous. "No problem," she said lightly. "I'll wait for the next flight." The flight attendant looked relieved, clearly hoping that was the end of it. But Alan, trying to recover some dignity, quickly added, "Of course, we'd like to offer you a travel voucher for the inconvenience. It's airline policy." Ava turned her full attention to him. "No, thank you," he blinked. "Excuse me, I don't need a voucher," she said, her voice suddenly sharp enough to slice through the air. "I own the investment firm that just saved your airline from going under. Mitchell Capital, you've heard of it, right?" The color drained from Alan's face. You're Ava Mitchell of Mitchell Capital." Around them the energy shifted. People nearby who had been pretending not to eavesdrop now looked directly at her. Murmurs spread quickly, like wildfire leaping from one dry branch to another. "That's her? No way!" The woman they kicked off the flight. Even the flight attendant took a half step back, lips parting, unsure if she should apologize or disappear. Ava remained composed, her voice now soft but firm. "I'm not here for special treatment," she said. "I never asked for that, but what happened on that plane wasn't a mistake. It was a decision. You saw a black woman in a hoodie walking into first class, and you made an assumption. That assumption cost you more than you can possibly understand." Alan's hands trembled slightly. "Miss Mitchell, I had no idea. If we had known, you would have treated me with respect because of my wealth." She interrupted, eyes narrowing. "That's not the point." He opened his mouth, then closed it again. There was no good answer. She adjusted the strap of her bag and turned to leave. "I'll be making some calls," she added over her shoulder. "You'll want to stay tuned." With that, Ava walked away from the gate, her footsteps echoing across the polished floor. Alan stood frozen, while the flight attendant finally lowered her gaze. Down the corridor, Ava stopped at a quiet corner near a coffee stand and pulled out her phone. She dialed her assistant, Jordan. "Yes, Ava." The young woman answered quickly. "Call a board meeting today, noon." "Understood. Topic, Thompson Air," Ava said coolly. "The deal's on pause until further notice, and I want a draft statement to the press. Something concise, no names yet. Just a firm message about what happens when a company's values don't align with ours." There was a pause on the other end. Then Jordan spoke again, voice tight with concern. "Should I cancel the press interviews lined up for next week?" "No," Ava replied. "We're going to use them." She ended the call, leaned against the wall, and watched a family boarding another flight. A young black girl holding her mother's hand, looking wide-eyed and excited. Ava's expression softened. That little girl deserved better. They all did. She took out her notebook and scribbled something on a page. "Not for press, not for business." Just one sentence, underlined 3 times. "Power means nothing if you don't use it for someone else." As she tucked the notebook away, her phone buzzed again. Incoming call. Greg Langston, CEO. Thompson Air. Ava stared at the screen for a moment, letting it ring twice before silencing it. "Not yet," she whispered. She would take the call eventually, but first she wanted them to sweat, to wonder, to feel even a sliver of what she had felt being paraded off a plane like a problem to be removed. She found another seat near a charging station and opened her laptop once more. Not angry, just focused, and that's what made her dangerous. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Ava Mitchell's private office in Manhattan. The skyline gleamed outside, a sea of steel and ambition, but inside her glass-walled sanctuary, the air was sharp with tension. Ava sat at the head of the sleek conference table, a steaming cup of black coffee untouched beside her. Her laptop screen glowed, already connected to a live Zoom call. The top brass of Mitchell Capital appeared in tiled windows. Legal advisors, her CFO, PR director, and senior analysts, all waiting. She didn't waste time. "Pull the paperwork." Ava said firmly. "We're freezing the Thompson Air deal, effective immediately." A moment of stunned silence followed. Then her CFO, a sharp-suited man named Brent Morales, leaned in. "Ava, it's a $4 billion investment. We've already committed funds. You sure you want to pull the plug over one incident?" Ava's eyes didn't waver. "It wasn't one incident, Brent. It was a symptom of a deeper problem. That flight crew didn't ask who I was. They didn't check the reservation system. They saw a black woman in a hoodie walking into first class and assumed I didn't belong." She paused, voice calm but cutting. "This isn't just personal, it's systemic, and I won't let our name fund an organization that lets discrimination pass as protocol." No one spoke. "Freeze the deal," she repeated, and get legal to review the exit clauses in our agreement. I want a clean detachment, no loopholes. Lisa Warren, her lead counsel, nodded. We'll move fast. There may be penalties, but we can argue breach of brand ethics. Good, Ava said. Now let's control the story before they spin it. PR, you're up. Her communications director, Jasmine Patel, already had a draft statement open. We're preparing a public release, something neutral but clear. We'll emphasize our commitment to equity and inclusion and our zero-tolerance policy toward discrimination, whether it's at the employee, executive, or partner level. Ava leaned forward. Make it stronger. This isn't just about disappointment. It's about accountability. I want it known that we withdrew funding because of what happened. Don't sugarcoat it. Yes, ma'am. Jasmine said, editing live on screen. We'll finalize and post within the hour. Within 45 minutes, Mitchell Capital's official statement went live across every platform: Twitter, LinkedIn, their corporate website, and email press lists. The headline read, Mitchell Capital freezes $4B deal with Thompson Air following racial profiling incident. The statement didn't name Ava directly, but it didn't have to. The story had already begun to catch fire. On Twitter, someone leaked the terminal video, Ava being escorted off the plane while calmly trying to show her boarding pass. The footage was shaky, grainy, but it didn't matter. The optics were devastating. By noon, #boycott Thompson Air was trending worldwide. Thousands of people began sharing their own experiences with the airline passengers who'd been racially profiled, employees of color who'd faced discrimination, even a few retired pilots who revealed quiet biases they had witnessed over the years. A black mother from Chicago posted about being told she couldn't board early with her toddler despite having first-class tickets. A Latino former mechanic spoke out about being overlooked for promotions in favor of less experienced white colleagues. The floodgates had opened. News outlets picked up the story. CNBC, CNN, Bloomberg, and even Good Morning America requested interviews with Mitchell Capital. Behind the scenes, panic erupted at Thompson Air headquarters. Ava's phone buzzed repeatedly with unknown numbers. Her assistant, Jordan, stepped into her office. They've called 6 times. She said, Greg Langston wants to speak with you personally. Let him wait. Ava said flatly, scrolling through headlines. One of them read, Thompson Air facing backlash after CEO of major investment firm kicked off flight for looking suspicious. She stared at the article for a long moment. This wasn't just revenge, it was reckoning. Meanwhile, Thompson Air's stock began to slide. Within 2 days, it dropped 17%. Analysts predicted further decline if the situation wasn't addressed swiftly. That night, Ava agreed to one interview The Wall Street Journal. She sat down in a simple navy suit, no designer flair, no dramatic flair. Just truth, I wasn't wearing diamonds or a power suit that day. She said during the interview, I didn't need to. My value doesn't come from how I'm dressed, but the airline decided otherwise. The interviewer leaned in. You've remained calm throughout this storm. No public outrage, no threats, just action. Why? Ava smiled softly. Because outrage fades, strategy lasts. If I yelled, they would have labeled me angry. If I cried, overdramatic. But if I moved billions of dollars quietly, that they couldn't ignore. The quote went viral. Back at Thompson Air, board members were furious. Meetings ran around the clock. Their PR teams scrambled to draft apologies, begging Ava for a public sit, down to clear the air. Shareholders threatened to withdraw. One even launched a lawsuit, but Ava remained silent, strategic silence, not avoidance, calculation. She called a meeting with her DI Advisory Council, a team of educators, community leaders, and activists she personally funded to review her firm's partnerships. Together, they discussed how to ensure real change, not just performative apologies. No more deals with companies that promise to do better, she said. We'll create a new benchmark for who gets our backing. Cultural accountability must be as important as financial solvency. Back at her desk, her inbox dinged. A new email from Greg Langston. Subject: Urgent request for meeting Ava. I want to extend my deepest personal apologies. What happened was unacceptable, and I take full responsibility. We're launching internal investigations and would like to discuss a path forward. Please let me know when you're available. Greg Langston, CEO. Thompson Air. Ava stared at the message for a long time. She didn't reply, not yet, because the apology wasn't for her. It was for the headlines, for the investors. For survival, she didn't need words. She had already made her statement, one that echoed across Wall Street, corporate boardrooms, and everyday households alike. Power, after all, speaks loudest when it moves in silence. The boardroom of Thompson Air looked like a battlefield without smoke-furrowed brows, rolled-up sleeves, and voices raised just below a shout. The mahogany table was littered with spreadsheets, printed tweets, and investor statements. Every executive had the same look in their eyes, fear. Greg Langston, the embattled CEO of Thompson Air, hadn't slept in 2 days. His collar was wrinkled, his tie loosened, and the bags under his eyes told a story no press release could fix. She's not responding to emails, not to calls, not to anything, he snapped, slamming his hand on the table. Well, can you blame her? Muttered Michelle, the company's chief marketing officer. We humiliated her. The most powerful woman in our funding circle, thrown off a plane like she was a threat. She's the reason we even had a Q2, the CFO said grimly. We don't just need her investment, we need her reputation. If Mitchell Capital backs out, others will too. I know. Greg muttered, rubbing his forehead, then he stood up abruptly. I'm going to New York. The board members looked at each other, confused. Without an invite, someone asked. She didn't need an invite to be treated with decency. He snapped. I'll show up, face to face, man to woman. If we're going down, I'm going to do everything I can to stop it. That afternoon, Ava Mitchell was reviewing a new proposal with her assistant Jordan when her receptionist buzzed in. There's someone here to see you, says it's urgent. Greg Langston, CEO of Thompson Air. Jordan's eyes widened. You want me to tell him you're unavailable? Ava paused. No, let him in, she said, adjusting the lapel of her navy blazer. Let's hear what desperation sounds like. A few minutes later, the doors opened and Greg entered the room, breathless and clearly flustered. He looked like a man who hadn't prepared because he hadn't. He was banking on charm, on white-collar remorse. Ava sat behind her desk, her hands wrapped around a mug of mint tea. Calm, measured, silent M.S. Mitchell. Thank you for seeing me, he began, voice shaky. I came to apologize, personally. Ava didn't blink. You have 5 minutes. Greg nodded and stumbled forward like a man stepping on glass. Look, what happened was a disgrace, he said. We've launched an internal investigation. The crew has been placed on immediate suspension. We're reviewing all procedures. I'll personally oversee new training, anti-bias, inclusion, customer service. He cleared his throat, then leaned in slightly. I'm asking you to reconsider freezing the investment. Thompson Air is more than that one incident. Ava raised an eyebrow. You're right, it's not just about that one incident. It's about the fact that your systems allowed it to happen, and that you only showed up now after your stock dropped. Greg hesitated. We'll issue a public apology, not just to you but across all platforms. We'll even donate to social justice causes. Fire the staff, retrain the entire airline, you name it, we'll do it. Ave slowly stood, her tone still as smooth as silk. You came to negotiate. I came to remember. Remember what it felt like to be treated like a criminal for daring to exist in a space your company decided I didn't belong. Greg's face flushed. I understand, I do, no, Ava said, walking around the desk, her heels echoing on the polished floor. You don't. You understand what it feels like to lose $4 billion and your corporate reputation in less than a week. But me, I understand how to build empires that don't tolerate excuses. Greg panicked. Okay, he said hurriedly, voice rising with desperation. We'll name a terminal after you, Mitchell Terminal or the Ava Wing. You can sit on our board. We'll even make you the face of our new campaign, Luxury and Leadership. Ava chuckled low and amused. You want to sell redemption like an ad. That's cute. He stood up, his voice cracking. This will ruin us, Ava. She stopped. Then maybe you shouldn't have built something so fragile on a foundation of bias. Greg looked like he might cry. Please, he whispered. I made a mistake. I'm here. Doesn't that count for something? Ava tilted her head and gave him the same polite. clipped smile that the flight attendant had given her at the gate. "Oh, it does count," she said softly. "It tells me how far people are willing to go once their money is on the line. But Greg, your company is worth more to me in the headlines than in my portfolio." She turned to her assistant, Jordan. Jordan pressed a button on the intercom. "Security," she said, voice calm. "Please escort Mr. Langston out." Greg's eyes widened. "You're joking." Ava didn't respond. She simply walked back to her desk, took a seat, and sipped her tea. Seconds later, 2 building security guards entered, polite but firm. "Sir, we'll need you to come with us." Greg opened his mouth to protest but stopped. There was no more bargaining, no more groveling, just the quiet click of his shoes against the marble as he was led out, mirroring the humiliating walk Ava had taken off his airline just days before. Poetic justice served cold. Outside in the lobby, cameras were already waiting. Word had leaked that Langston was in the building. A few journalists tried to question him, but he kept his head down, brushing past them as flashes went off. Inside, Ava returned to work like nothing happened. She clicked on her next video call. An invitation from a tech conglomerate in Asia seeking ethical investment partners. "M.S. Mitchell," the CEO on screen said with a smile. "It's an honor. We admire your firm's integrity and leadership. We were wondering if you'd be open to discussing a partnership. We've recently divested from Thompson Air." Ava's smile was quiet. "Controlled, I'd be happy to talk," she said, "because power, real power, doesn't beg. It doesn't apologize when it's too late. It simply moves forward smarter, stronger, unshaken." 2 months later, headlines across every major news outlet screamed what the industry already suspected. Thompson Air files for restructuring amid investor exodus. The once dominant airline, once confident in its legacy, was now gasping for survival. The $4 billion investment from Mitchell Capital, initially hailed as its lifeline, had been yanked back with such force it had torn the seams of the company. Without Ava Mitchell's backing, investors panicked. Some jumped ship overnight. Others issued statements condemning the company's handling of the incident that sparked a firestorm. Behind closed doors, the board scrambled to spin narratives, raise emergency capital, and plead with regulatory bodies. But none of it could stop the tide. Meanwhile, Ava remained silent. No press tour, no exposés, no media circus. Just strategic moves behind the scenes, calculated, surgical. Rumors began to spread in the aviation world like wildfire. "Mitchell's not done. She's going to let Thompson bleed. She's setting up something big." They were right. While Thompson flailed, Ava struck swift and precise. Mitchell Capital acquired Skyward International, Thompson's biggest rival and the second largest airline on the continent. Unlike Thompson, Skyward had a cleaner reputation and a forward-thinking infrastructure, but they lacked the capital to scale. Ava gave them that, plus something they hadn't expected, vision. The deal made headlines, shocking analysts who hadn't seen it coming. With the acquisition finalized, Ava Mitchell was now the majority shareholder of the largest merged airline in North America. The new entity was sleek, modern, and rebranded in bold letters. Equijet. The name said everything. Her first executive order, a complete overhaul of internal culture. Gone were the outdated hiring practices. Ava implemented anonymous hiring across every level, from ground staff to cockpit crew to C-suite executives. Resumes would no longer list names or photos. Candidates would be judged on merit, experience, and values, nothing more. She introduced mandatory equity and inclusion training company-wide, not as a checkbox, but as a core requirement for leadership certification. Managers and executives had to pass rigorous empathy training modules and undergo quarterly evaluations based on real-world performance, not just boardroom performance. On every aircraft, she had custom real-time passenger feedback systems installed. Each seat now had a discrete touch screen interface allowing passengers to report discrimination or service concerns directly and anonymously, ensuring that no one ever had to feel powerless again. This was more than reform. It was revolution, and it had a name, Dignity in Flight. At the official launch of EquaJet, media gathered from around the world. The room buzzed with tension and curiosity. Everyone wanted to hear from the woman who'd shaken an entire industry to its core. Ava stood before a sleek, minimalist stage, dressed in a tailored white blazer and black trousers. Her presence alone commanded the room. Behind her, a massive screen flashed the new EquaJet logo, wings wrapped around a globe lined with the company's new motto, "Every seat, equal worth." The applause was thunderous. A reporter from a major business outlet raised a hand. "Ms. Mitchell, with all due respect, many believe this was about revenge. You tanked Thompson Air and rose from its ashes. Isn't this your way of settling the score?" Ava paused. Her smile was calm but firm. "No," she said, stepping forward, "this was never about revenge. It was about respect. Something every person deserves whether they are seated in 1A or working in cargo." Cameras flashed, the room quieted. She continued. "You see, systems don't change because of apologies. They change when power demands accountability. I didn't destroy Thompson Air. They did that themselves when they chose bias over integrity. All I did was refuse to co-sign it." The audience leaned in. "I'm not here to be the face of vengeance. I'm here to be the architect of something better, something fair, something built to last, because equity isn't charity, it's strategy." More applause, sustained, heartfelt. Later that afternoon, Ava prepared to board EquaJet's inaugural flight from New York to San Francisco, the same route where it had all begun. Cameras filmed as she ascended the boarding stairs of the gleaming new aircraft, which shimmered under the afternoon sun. The airline's sleek branding wrapped around the fuselage, the doors opened to a spacious, reimagined cabin, wide aisles, soothing colors, and staff uniforms redesigned for both elegance and comfort. As Ava stepped into the aircraft, the flight attendant at the front door smiled warmly. "Welcome aboard, Ms. Mitchell," she said with genuine warmth. Ava nodded. "Thank you, it's good to be here." She made her way to seat 1A, her seat, not because of wealth, not because of status, but because she'd earned her place at the front of an industry that once tried to throw her out the back. She sat down, gazing out the window. The engines hummed to life. Her phone buzzed quietly. A message from Jordan, her assistant. "Full bookings for EquaJet's first 2 months. Passenger satisfaction surveys at 94%. Investors are already lining up. You did it." Ava smiled and typed one sentence in reply. "We're just getting started." As the plane pushed back from the gate and began to taxi, Ava closed her eyes. Not to sleep, but to imagine the skies ahead, skies that now belonged to everyone. This time, she wouldn't fly unnoticed. She'd fly unshaken. Ava Mitchell didn't just walk away from a bad experience, she transformed it into a movement. What began as an act of discrimination became a spark for change across the aviation industry. Her actions sent a loud, clear message. Power isn't always loud, it's calculated, strategic, and backed by purpose. By refusing to stay silent, Ava reshaped the very system that tried to silence her, and in doing so, she gave others the courage to stand up, speak out, and demand the respect they deserve. This wasn't just about one seat on one plane, it was about every seat everywhere. If this story moved you or made you think, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss another powerful story. Drop a comment below. What would you have done if you were in Ava's shoes? And remember, sometimes the most powerful revenge is building something better. Thanks for watching Hidden Realities. Until next time, stay strong, stay bold, and stay real.